Is this thing recording now?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you? My assumption is that you can see and it works and all that kind of.
Yeah, I lined it. I lined everything.
And I can't move or anything like that.
Basically.
Okay.
So, what I wanted to understand from you, I know what my concerns are over the Morgan Stanley story.
Okay.
What are your concerns?
So, about, I don't know, a month ago or so, in a conference call, talking about being able to qualify vendors to do ITAM, ITAD work. Someone had brought up the fact that Morgan Stanley had decommissioned 2 data centers. They had an ITAD service provider. Nobody seems to know who this ITAD service provider is. And now all of a sudden, however many years later, there's a data breach. Morgan Stanley's pointing their fingers at the service provider, and that was it. That was the extent of the conversation. And then,
and that's your interpretation.
That's my interpretation. Yeah. Then, about 10 days after that, I read in one of the journals, whether it's eScrap or whomever, that this is a real deal. They still don't, either they don't know who the vendor is or they won't say who the vendor is. And then more details start to come out where it's not just one instance with 2 data centers, but now it's an instance of, okay, not only is the vendor being accused of not properly destroying data, but oh my God, they also lost equipment. And Morgan Stanley can't do anything about that because apparently there was no proper tracking of equipment. Again, that's just my interpretation of what I read, right?
Right.
So I'm concerned because, number one, it's challenging enough to work in the industry today with, hey, I can do this for free. Hey, I'm going to pay you for all your junk. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do whatever. And for 20 years, we've done things the right way. We spent an inordinate amount of money on insurance. We spent a lot of money with iSigma for certifications, of which we believe in.
Employee training, building security, staff security,
we have an incredible amount of overhead in our business in order to legitimately participate in this industry and do things the right way.
Right.
So what I'm bothered by is, okay, I'm not a real smart guy, but Morgan Stanley is a global player, number one, okay? So I want to understand, how does somebody get to do work for Morgan Stanley and there isn't some kind of, and maybe there was.
How does somebody, meaning a vendor?
Yeah.
How do you become a vendor of a client like a Morgan Stanley?
Right.
And have this happen?
Right. And not only that, but where was the breakdown in due diligence?
Sure. And I think those are all logical questions. I think I'm also looking at a concern about how often has Reclamier, as a service provider, been put at risk because our clients don't have good internal processes leading up to the point that we take custody.
I can tell you too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Out of, I just did the count today, 13,349 projects we have done in this company.
Nice job.
I'm guessing for over about 1,000 clients. That's ballpark. The 13,349, that's spot on, because that's the lot number that's coming in this afternoon.
Okay.
But my concern is the fact that we can take the horse, or we can come to the water with the horse.
Okay.
Okay? But we can't make the horse drink.
Right.
So many, many, many times we ask our clients, do you have an inventory report? They don't have one. Now, I would be just as happy if they said, yes, we have an inventory report and we know what we're giving you, but we're not telling you because we're going to reconcile it against what we send you.
Right.
That kind of dual control and double checks, that's exactly what you should have on your vendor, whether it's Reclamier or any other organization out there. So I'm looking at it from Morgan Stanley's side and saying, did we have a proper inventory to begin with? And I'm looking at it from the vendor side saying, how is this vendor going to prove a negative? How is this vendor going to be able to possibly prove, and keeping in mind we don't have the full details, we're just going by what's in the media,
Sure.
We're going by scuttlebutt with industry folks talking about this, and we're not in any way trying to use a terrible situation in any way to our advantage. We're trying to use a situation to educate and come to understand it ourselves.
Well, I think to your point, so I think the answer is, when you start talking about how does the vendor prove a negative?
Mm-hmm.
They don't. I don't think they can. And so I think that the lesson is that, okay, rewind the tape a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I still think that one of the problems that we have in the industry is this thing called equipment is still looked at as an afterthought.
Exactly.
It is a nightmare.
It's
Nobody
trash.
wants to deal with. It's trash. It's e-waste. All of the things that we've been hearing for the last 20 some odd years about this equipment. And no matter what people want to preach when it comes to environmental compliance or data security and life cycle management, at the end of the day, they just want it out of their building, and now it's even more complicated because nobody's in these buildings, for goodness sake. And so there's a cultural mindset that people have got to get past this being just simply junk.
Mm-hmm.
So they really take inventory reconciliation seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm imagining that any other asset that a Morgan Stanley or someone else owns is inventoried, it's valued, it's depreciated, and it is
removed from the books
in whatever methodical process is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to this equipment, people still just put it in a box and go, oh my gosh, get rid of it.
Well, I think, one of the proposals we're working on right now, a big driver to how this project is being spec'd out is the fact that obviously the financial forces seem to be driving the ship because they want to take assets off of the books and therefore they want a record. I think one of the most dangerous times are these lease returns, and especially server lease returns, because you and I have been told on numerous occasions by clients that the leasing company told us they're going to take care of it.
Right.
And we look at that leasing agreement and it explicitly says that the leasing company is not responsible for any data on anything returned to them, and that in fact that it's the client who's going to indemnify the leasing company if something happens. And that led me to do some pretty extensive Google research on leasing companies. And I can tell you based on my research that you better have your ducks in a row when you return this stuff back to leasing companies. Because the lawsuits of the leasing companies actually suing their own clients, it blew my mind. I mean, we know that we have to be extremely, extremely careful in everything to do with managing our clients' lease returns, from obviously making sure that the data is destroyed and certified, giving health reports on every single piece of equipment as we destroy the data and then subsequently test it. We have pictures of everything that goes to the leasing company. But if a single part is missing, a lot of these leases are written in such a way that the lease will automatically renew, and it's for hundreds of millions of dollars. I found one leasing company, it's the most common one that we see folks working with on server leases, they won a $464,000 judgment against one of their own clients. And the worst part was it was a school. So at the end of the day with a school, taxpayers are footing the bill for that.
Right.
But basically they said that the exact equipment did not come back to the leasing company. And it was something innocuous. I mean, we're talking like tape trays or some, not even anything that had to do with the functioning of this equipment. So to kind of circle the whole thing back, maybe what will happen with Morgan Stanley is maybe this is going to be the type of thing that is going to force more people to get the financial departments involved in support of proper IT asset management at all stages, so that things like breached information potentially caused by a vendor, or auto renewals being generated through bad lease return, or lease return mishap. Maybe this is the beginning of what it could possibly take. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but it was sometime shortly after the banking crisis of 08, 09, somewhere around there, where we purchased a tractor trailer load of equipment to resell, to refurbish and resell.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
We purchased it. It was not an ITAM product. Right. And it was computers from Bear Stearns that still had all of their data on it. Now, Bear Stearns had gone bankrupt as part of that the banking meltdown. So how many other companies out there, and particularly like today where we've got all of this, everything is happening, everything has gone crazy because of COVID, and it's taken every complex problem and magnified the complexity.
Well, I think that it's not just about the Morgan Stanleys or the Bear Stearns or the mega huge companies that are out there, but take a look at those small organizations that have 500 employees or less, and they either donate equipment or they give equipment away or they try to sell it on eBay or what have you. And the fact of the matter is that, at least the way that the story was written about Morgan Stanley is this initial incident began back in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is that similar to environmental liability, your liability around data privacy, data security, data integrity doesn't go away.
I wonder how they figured this out. Because one of the things I keep reading in the stories is that there is no evidence that any of the data has been accessed or used.
There was I believe there was a complaint. I believe there was a complaint that was filed by a Morgan Stanley customer.
Okay.
I think so, if I remember correctly. And then there was also a follow-up to that where during an investigation, it was determined by a senior executive at Morgan Stanley that when they went to do an inventory of the equipment that was in question, they couldn't identify the equipment, they couldn't find it. There was no serialization, there was no location, there was no classification. They literally did not know where this equipment had gotten to.
Okay.
So I think there's a couple things, because a really good friend of ours who you are very fond of, as am I, talked about what do you do next? Like, what are the follow-ups to that, right? And so I would put it back on you. There's two things. There's a vendor qualification issue, and there's an inventory management issue. So what do we tell people now today, getting ready to go into 2021, if you don't want to be in the same position as Morgan Stanley? What do we tell those people? And I don't care how big they are.
Right.
But what are your tips to these people? Like, what do you tell them to do?
Well, I think one of my biggest concerns right now is around every time I log on to a big hardware distributor or manufacturer, they all of a sudden have IT asset management programs.
Right.
And you and I know that those are subcontracted, subcontracted, subcontracted. And by the time that material, first of all, is picked up by the first subcontractor, goes to the next, actually usually sits in a warehouse somewhere waiting to be consolidated, then makes it back to wherever the data is going to be destroyed at a subcontractor, and then ultimately that material goes to a final materials processing facility, smelting or any type of recycling reclamation. You've now got 4, 5 subcontractors in a chain of custody that is very problematic.
So is industry certification enough?
I think if you're looking at something like NAID AAA certification,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
because we're talking about the protection of data, and that is the most paramount point. But the number one thing is to have the fewest points of custody transfer through the process.
How do you accomplish that then? What do you do?
Well, it starts with the contract,
Okay.
and making sure that any and all subcontractors are disclosed, and then making sure that you're doing the same vetting on the subcontractor as you are the vendor themselves. Because you and I have seen situations where companies are subcontractors, and we know that there was no way that they could have met the criteria to have been a prime. But every contract that we get in here, if it does allow subcontracting, requires that your subcontractors have the same or better security than what is being required in the contract.
So I could be going really off course, and because of your power of editing, you can always edit this out.
Yes, I can.
Is it worthwhile to say to folks, whether they're the Morgan Stanleys of the world or they are looking to partner with other ITAM service providers, that performing some level of due diligence on those folks is really important? And oh, by the way, you've developed a really powerful and very robust due diligence tool.
Mm-hmm.
And that because you're really nice, you'd be willing to share that information with folks. Is that something that you would be willing to do?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll even go further. I mean, we offer a lot of opportunities to kind of try out Reclamier before you buy. If you go to our website, www.reclamier.com.
You've just shown your age, by the way.
I said www?
Yeah, you did.
I'm old.
You are old, but not as old as me.
You're right. You will always be 6 months older than me.
I will. Yes, I will.
But we have 4 distinct calls to action right now about things that we will do at no charge. And they range from security awareness training through IT asset management to data security consulting and risk. We absolutely would not only give folks a vendor due diligence checklist so they can check their own vendors, we would do a no cost, no obligation review of their IT asset management contract with whatever vendor that they have. And they can black out the name of the vendor if they would like to, but we will do that contract review for them.
I think
and
that,
give them good constructive feedback.
Along those same lines, one of the things I would say, and I think that's pretty cool. I was in Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago to talk with a future partner of Reclamier for IT asset management. And what's fascinating still today, the number of pieces of business that are being transacted in ITAM, ITAD with no contract at all.
Yeah.
There is no master service agreement. There's no service level agreement. There's no T's and C's. There ain't nothing other than, hey, here's a letter from my mom and my report card, and I'm going to do business with you. And which is, it's really fascinating, because I think one of the values that we got from Nate a long time ago was understanding how important it was to have a service agreement in place, a contractual agreement that tells you, Mr. Customer, and you, Mr. Vendor, who's liable, who's responsible, et cetera, and so forth. And I'm shocked that still goes on today.
Well, in addition to just being bad practice and being very risky, you're also violating your own industry regulations in spaces like healthcare, financial services, because you are required to have vendor contracts in place with security requirements for certain industries, for certain countries, such as the GDPR, General Data Protection Rule in Europe. So all of these things require contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, so if somebody's watching this and they don't even have a contract, give us a call. Because I'm not going to say we'll write your contract for free, but we'll certainly give you a lot of pointers. And if you did want us to help put something like that together, we could definitely do that. All the way back to helping you write your own policies and procedures for your IT asset management program, from point of purchase all the way through final disposition.
So the takeaway then is we've got an issue around policy, so ITAM policies, how we perform due diligence on vendors, how we structure a contract, not just a handshake, but a contract between a vendor and a client. And then also industry certifications, and those industry certifications both on the environmental side as well as the data security side.
Yes.
Did I kind of hit everything?
Absolutely, you hit them all.
Super.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't do an introduction, so should we do a close? Since we didn't do an introduction to data security over coffee? Unless we're not supposed to call it that anymore. I don't know. Maybe you have to edit
No, it
that
is data security over coffee, but I didn't, it's too late in the day for coffee.
Okay.
So,
It could be data
Yeah.
security over vodka.
yeah, but now you're showing your age.
Why is that?
Because this is supposed to be like a podcast.
Okay.
And
Well,
podcast, or, they don't have like the formal intro. I'm Joe Harford, and I'm here to tell you about blah, blah, blah.
okay.
Or a formal close.
Okay. You know what? I've learned something in 20 years. And what I've learned is you're right. And I'm done.
So, in closing, check out below in the description comment section for information on how to get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to help you in any way that we can.
Later.